Thousands of people have gathered in Sheffield for a flypast in honour of 10 American airmen whose plane crashed there 75 years ago. Tony Foulds was an 8-year-old boy when, on this day in 1944, he saw the US bomber crash into his local park. It's thought the crew were deliberately trying to avoid nearby homes in order to save the lives of residents. Well, since then, Mr. Foulds, who's now 82, has dedicated himself to looking after a memorial to the men, tending it almost every day for decades. Well, a chance meeting with the BBC's Dan Walker then led to a campaign for a flypast, and today it finally happened, as both the US Air Force and the RAF paid tribute to the crew who died. Well, our correspondent David Silito is in Sheffield for us this afternoon, and David, what an incredible story.
Yeah, the remarkable thing is that this began with a single conversation here in a park just, well, 2 or 3 months ago. Dan Walker of BBC Breakfast met an elderly gentleman called Tony Foulds, and he saw that he was, well, carefully tending this memorial. And he asked him, "Why are you here? Why do you come every day?" Well, Tony began to tell him a story.
On the 22nd of February 1944, 10 US airmen died when their plane crashed in a park in Sheffield. The badly damaged B-17 Flying Fortress, known as Mi Amigo, was coming back from a bombing raid in Europe. Experts have always thought the crew aimed for Endcliffe Park to avoid the thousands of houses that surround it.
We saw this plane circle just over the rooftops.
Tony Foulds was playing in the park that day.
As it came over, from inside, don't know whether it was pilot or whether it was bomb, on that front side went like this. Now, we waved back, 8-year-old, we thought they were waving, when actually they were wanting us to get off at grass.
Tony's been tending a memorial to those 10 men for decades. He considers the Americans to be part of his family and has spent most of his life keeping that memory alive. Since we first spoke to Tony on BBC Breakfast, the story of those 10 men has touched the hearts of thousands right around the world, and they've all shared Tony's dream of marking the 75th anniversary with a flypast.
We end here tonight with the echoes of war and a man who has dedicated his life to honouring strangers.
The story has even made news in the US.
Tony, lovely to see you again.
A month ago, Tony got his wish.
It gives me great pleasure to say, look to the skies on 22 February for a very special flyby.
You got your flyby, Tony. Woo!
Today, Sheffield will have the chance to pay tribute to the men of Mi Amigo, who made the ultimate sacrifice 75 years ago.
Yeah. Which brings us to today. Well, as you can see, there are a few people here at the memorial and a glorious sunny day. But earlier, around about 8:30 this morning, the crowds were in their thousands. And, well, how do you describe it? Tony had one word: breathtaking. Normally, Tony Foulds' daily visit to the War Memorial in Sheffield's Endcliffe Park is a moment of quiet and solitary reflection. But today, he was not alone. From first light, thousands had begun to arrive. The grass where he had played as an 8-year-old and watched as the Mi Amigo had crashed into the trees to avoid hitting him was now a sea of people. For the last 30 years, he had dreamt that the 75th anniversary, that terrible day, would be marked, perhaps with a flypast. His dream had come true.
Unbelievable, unbelievable. They'll be loving this. That's breathtaking, this.
And then, in an almost cloudless sky, the first glimpse of an aircraft. And just as he had done as an 8-year-old, Tony waved to the plane. And all around him, the crowd were watching, both the spectacle in the sky and the man at the heart of it all.
We just felt we had to be here today because of Tony.
The fact that he's been coming here every day to commemorate the the plaque behind us is remarkable.
Now approaching is the KC-135 Stratotanker from the 100th Air Refueling Wing at RAF Mildenhall.
I think everybody really appreciated seeing that side, and I know Tony did. And I think a lot of folks were watching Tony to see Tony's reaction more so than watching the airplanes, which is really cool to watch.
I can't believe that airplanes in the sky would be so moving and so significant.
It wasn't just Tony shedding a tear, but it's a day of complex emotions for a man who feared the men might have survived if he had not been there.
Does this help things for you?
No, never will, never will. Like I say, if you just think if you were to kill one person in a car 10 times, and that's what it's like, the guilt, and it gets stronger as I get older. It doesn't weaken in any way.
And at the end, a moment not with planes or crowds, but Tony alone with those 10 men that he says saved his life. So a day of memories for one man, an extraordinary story, and of course those 10 lives lost. But what is perhaps more sobering than anything is that this was just one bomber on a day. It was explained to me earlier today that on that same day they lost another 34 bombers. These stories echo around Europe. With that, back to you, Ben.
David, thank you very much indeed. David Sillitoe there for us in Sheffield. Well, as we were hearing, all of this happened because of that chance encounter in the park between Tony and BBC Breakfast's Dan Walker, who was missing from today's ceremony because he's in Tanzania for comic relief. Well, Dan can talk to us now. Dan, I know you were able to watch the coverage from there in Africa. How did you feel when you were watching it?
Well, good afternoon to you, Ben. I suppose exactly as David was explaining it there, real day of mixed emotions, because I spent virtually every day either speaking or talking to Tony in person over the last 6 weeks, trying to plan this event, keeping parts of it secret from him because we wanted it to be a surprise. And so there's the excitement that there's some amazing planes from the US Air Force and the RAF going over a park in Sheffield to commemorate this 75th anniversary. But on top of that, as David was saying, there's all the emotion of the fact that these 10 men 75 years ago sacrificed their life so that Tony and many others who were playing in the park that day could have the lives that they have enjoyed. And that's, I think, where Tony's guilt that he's been carrying for all this time comes from. And that's why I think it was as a happy day today, but also an incredibly emotional occasion. And watching here from sort of Comic Relief HQ in Tanzania, it was no less emotional. And I'll be honest with you, I found it very difficult to watch today, but there was a smile on the face at the same time.
Yeah, we're just seeing some pictures there of you watching it, and obviously very emotional, understandably. Just looking back, when you had that chance encounter with Tony, did you ever think that it could lead to what we've seen today and thousands of people attending this Flypast?
No way whatsoever. I mean, it was the first week of January. I was walking my dog. I was in a rush in the park. I bumped into Tony. He was trying to pick up some leaves from the memorial, and I literally just said to him, "Are you okay?" And 6 weeks down the line, we've come to this. And we had a 15-minute conversation. And at the end of that, Tony said, "I'd love some new tarmac for the memorial. The path's a bit broken up. I'd love a flagpole to raise the American flag. And a Flypast would be amazing." And because of the strength of his story, I foolishly, Ben, said, "I'll sort it out for you, Tony, don't worry." And somehow, you know, with the help of so many other people, we've managed to do it. And Tony, he doesn't even watch the television. I mean, for quite a few weeks, he wasn't really aware of this story and the magnitude of it all. And that's why I think today was so emotional for me to watch and for so many other people to watch, because here is a man who has quietly been silently serving these 10 men for such a long time, amazingly doing an amazing job in this park on his own without wanting any public attention. And today, I think he finally realised how big an impact his story and his diligence and his service has had on so many other people, not just in Sheffield, not just in the UK, but around the world. And that, I think, is why so many people have bought into this story, Ben, and so many people have talked about it today and been touched by it, including the families of those men from Mi Amigo as well. It's you know, the most amazing thing I've ever been involved in as a journalist, and I don't know how many other Tonys there are out there, but he is one in a million.
All right, well said, Dan. Really an amazing story. Well done to you, and good luck with Comic Relief as well. Dan Walker there in Tanzania for us.